Hello, everybody. This is Sandy Shellis, and I'm with Environmental Coffee House. This is the weekly show, Last Week in Collapse, and it is Jared Brock's weekly newsletter, compiling some of the most important, timely, useful, soul-crushing, ironic, stunning, exhausting, or otherwise must-see, can't-look-away moments in collapse. There's a lot going on in the world, as always, and we're going to start now. The EU Green Coalition claims that the Green New Deal is probably dead now, since conservatives are projected to make small gains in this June's EU parliamentary election. Gullies are becoming more common in Brazil and several other South American states, a crisis worsened by climate change and deforestation. Check this out. The vast ravines swallowing whole neighborhoods around the world. This is Buritica, a city in northeast Brazil. This was once a bustling street in Buritica, a city in northeast Brazil. Now it is a vast chasm, 80 meters deep. A 20-story building could fit inside it. And this is happening in other places. Canyons like this are known locally as Vococora, or torn land, in indigenous Tupi-Guarani language. The phenomenon is a result of gully erosion, one of the most aggressive forms of soil degradation caused by rain and wastewater. It's advancing at a worrying speed, destroying thousands of homes in Latin America and Africa. A former police officer was nearly killed when he fell into this gully. He got lost as he was driving home from a party one night in May 2023. As he turned the car around, the 79-year-old reversed and accelerated backwards. It was dark. There were no warning signs. So, he was knocked unconscious, and he woke up at the bottom 3 hours later. Holy shit, check that out. This poor guy. But this is what is facing these people. 70,000 residents. Gullies. They've been part of the Earth's geological history for millions of years. But Professor Pereira and other experts we spoke to said that existing gullies are expanding more rapidly, and they fear new ones will open because of climate change, which can make rainfall way more intense, which we've been seeing. So this is what that's just how many they have in there. It's insane, huh? All right. One coastal municipality in Brazil has seen 50-plus homes eaten by new holes. 100-plus families have been displaced there as well. The process happens when large quantities of rainfall, unable to be absorbed into the soil because of overdevelopment and deforestation, run off, carrying the dirt away with it. In the Himalayas, glacial lakes are growing from the massive meltwater piling up in the mountains.
Himalayan glaciers are melting rapidly because of climate change. And this should concern you. Why? Because the Himalayan glaciers supply water to India's usable water sources. If the glaciers melt at this rate, devastations are inbound. Now let's see what is going on there. Himalayan glaciers have been shrinking for 5 decades, but now that process has sped up. The rising temperature and precipitation change are the likely causes. Data says that temperature anomaly around parts of Uttarakhand and Himachal will hit up to 3 degrees during May. So the Himalayas are on the front line of climate change. Studies say that the higher altitude, the faster the temperature changes. So a higher altitude area could experience warming up of up to 4 to 5 degrees Celsius by 2100. For instance, the region's annual average surface air temperature has increased from 0.1 to 0.2 degrees Celsius. India Today's DIU team analyzed 40 years of temperature data of India's two cities, Shimla and Uttarkashi, to trace the unusual heat pattern. Both cities have seen an upward trend in temperature shifts. Shimla, the capital of Himachal Pradesh, experienced a sharp temperature rise with a 40-year high of around 4 degrees Celsius in March and April. Similar temperature changes were seen in Uttarkashi in the same period. April 2022 was the warmest April across the world. Extreme temperatures and heat waves have become more frequent from Antarctica to the Himalayas. Now, the Himalayas glaciers have been melting for the past 5 decades, and it might result in a significant threat to the regional water resources and flash flood-like disasters.
Climatologists believe this summer is going to break records for temperature and or humidity with a 70% chance. That's high. A study in the NPJ Climate and Atmospheric Science determined that AI holds a great potential in forecasting future storms. The record-breaking heat and humidity predicted for the tropics this summer. A new statistical analysis of the interaction between El Nino and the rising global temperatures due to climate change concludes that the approaching summer in the tropics has a nearly 7 in 10 chance of breaking records for temperature and humidity. The prediction by climate scientists at the University of California, Berkeley applies to a broad swatch of the world straddling the equator, including India and the bulk of Africa, Central and South America, and Australia. But it also includes Florida and Texas. So it's going to hit everywhere. Everywhere. Long-term predictions like this can help regions prepare for these extreme heat events and protect humans, livestock, and crops. The November 2023 storm Kiran predicted its 48-hour trajectory with reasonable accuracy. That's pretty incredible, but it's also good at the same time. A dust storm blew into Athens from Africa, the worst such incident in 6 years. The images look like they're straight out of a sci-fi movie or from Mars. Athens is swallowed up by orange haze from Sahara dust storm. Now, authorities in Greece warn that the dust concentrations can reduce sunlight and visibility while increasing levels of fine pollution particles that pose health risks. Check out the video. That's intense. So check it out. A wave of Sahara dust covers the Greek capital in Athens. Oh my gosh. They've already been struck by Sahara dust clouds in late March and early April, which also smothered parts of Switzerland and southern France. Authorities warn that the dust concentrations can reduce sunlight and visibility while increasing concentrations of fine pollution particles, posing risks for people with underlying health problems. That's lovely. Lovely. These are insane. Can you imagine? Just standing there breathing it all in. Wow. Taiwan felt 6.3 magnitude aftershocks from its 7.3 earthquake 3 weeks earlier, rumbling buildings. Now, Thailand, they issued an extreme heat warning after temperatures surpassed 40 C, which is 104 this week, with a heat index expected to break 52, which is 125 Fahrenheit. In the first 108 days of this year, Thailand recorded 30 deaths from heat stroke. Compare that with 37 in all of 2023. Meanwhile, the heat index in the Philippines hit 47C, which is 117, forcing government to close thousands of schools. One scientist said there was a 50-50 chance the heat worsening. It's going to worsen in coming days. So last week was pretty tough for them in the Philippines. And we had seen weeks before, I showed you pictures of the pools, the portable pools for kids in schools. Drought in the Philippines got so bad that an old settlement flooded by construction of a 1970s dam resurfaced after El Nino aggravated drought dropped reservoir levels. Now, the CDC and the United States, the National Weather Service, they released a new heat scale with another color representing the most dangerous level of heat.
The early blast of warm weather is a preview of things to come, according to the CDC and the National Weather Service.
Well, the agencies are teaming up now to help Americans stay safe in this heat. And health reporter Stephanie Stahl joining us with more on the expected heat emergencies.
That's right. Get ready for the heat, guys. It is coming. You know, last summer was the hottest ever recorded in the United States, and heat-related health emergencies also reached record high levels in many parts of the country. Well, officials say it could be another record breaker this summer. Get ready for another scorching summer. Federal health officials are warning about the potential for a surge in heat-related health emergencies. Last year, they accounted for a 20% larger share of ER visits than they did in the 5 previous years. Federal health officials say heat-related illnesses cause more than 600 deaths in the United States every year. 2023 was the warmest August on record globally and warmer than all other months except July.
For every, incremental increase in temperature outside, there is a accompanying increase in heart attack. And that is made worse by air pollution and particulate matter in the air.
Mainline health cardiologist William Gray says bad air in the Philadelphia region, especially in the summer, increases the risk for heart and respiratory illnesses. And that's not all.
There could be a relationship with more of these severe weather phenomenon that we're seeing both in the United States and globally, and an increase in headache and migraine attacks.
Doctors also say the elderly and young children are most at risk for heat-related medical emergencies. In an effort to protect everyone from the dangerous heat, the CDC has a new heat and health initiative. There's an interactive dashboard where people can enter their zip code and get personalized heat forecast information for their location, along with protective actions. And Philadelphia and other counties also have a variety of resources for code red events when the heat becomes dangerous. Mainly, they are advising people when that does happen to stay inside in air conditioning. It's the best thing you can do to protect yourself. So I say, let's get ready for another hot summer here in the city.
Another scorcher.
Yes, it is. I say it during the winter months. I'll say it now. Slow your roll.
There you go.
There
you go.
All right, Steph, thanks so much.
For the first time, we'll be able to know how hot is too hot for health, and not just for today, but for coming weeks, said Dr. Ari Bernstein, director of the National Center for Health, Environmental Health, that is. He said at a joint news conference by governmental health and weather agencies, magenta is the worst and deadliest of 5 heat threat categories, hitting everybody with what agencies are calling rare and or long-term duration of extreme heat with little overnight relief. It's a step higher than red, considered a major risk, which hurts anyone without adequate cooling and hydration. So welcome to the Anthropocene. Meanwhile, the famed climate scientist Michael Mann is predicting the most storms on record this hurricane season, estimating 33 in total. Water shortage in Scotland. Drought in Spain and Greece expands. One major Spanish wine company laid off 80% of its staff indefinitely because the vines are barely producing anything. So for all you wine aficionados, you're going to have to probably just buy California wine in the United States anyway. In Thailand, sugar farms are drying up. In France, a strange kind of last chance tourists from all over are converging on the Alps to see once epic glaciers before they're gone forever. That's pretty wild. Last chance tourists. A new gondola lift opened in February provides easier access to the endangered Mer de Glace glacier. Site managers are keen to enhance the glacier's appeal, even if it means accepting the paradox between mass tourism and climate change awareness. In the front entrance to the ice cave, a man was shoveling before the influx of visitors. Antoine Claret Tournier, 34, works as a grotto keeper at the Campagna du Mont Blanc. He is responsible for digging and maintaining a 165-meter labyrinth excavated inside the glacier, and there he is. Every year, like Sisyphus pushing his boulder, he digs a new cave using a small tunnel boring machine, a 4-month job. In 2023, the structure melted too quickly and didn't even last the entire season. A new one had to be built faster than planned. For the moment, there's no question of giving up as visitors to the Mer de Glace eagerly await the grotto. That year, 450,000 people visited this major tourist site in the Alps. Wow. They would travel on a vintage red train from 1909. They took a gondola to the base, and that's it. So this is what it looks like, April 2nd. And they're going there to look at the destruction of our planet. Europe, the fastest warming continent, is seeing more days of heat stress than ever before. A study in Earth's Future examined the effect of wildfires in Greater Siberia and found that they are projected to create a cooling effect over part of the northern hemisphere, along with the more obvious lowered air quality and economic damage. Key points. This is the Advancing Earth and Space Sciences Comprehensive Impact of Changing Siberian Wildfire Severities on Air Quality, Climate, and Economy, using the MIROC5 Global Climate Model Sensitivity Assessments. Wildfires emit atmospheric aerosols affecting climate and air quality. Siberia is a known source region of wildfires. However, comprehensive knowledge regarding the impact associated with particulate matter pollution due to those wildfires on climate and air quality and their effects on mortality and the economy under present and near future warming atmospheric conditions remains poor. The total area of oases across the world expanded from 1995 to 2020 by 220,000 hectares, an area larger than the size of the island of Britain or Japan's largest island, Honshu. Most of this expansion was the result of artificial expansion, but a study from Earth's Future also says that the risk of desertification is quite high owing to mismanagement of water resources. Of course they do. And wildfires in British Columbia and Alberta, including dozens of carryover fires from last year. Blazes, they break out in Western Canada as wildfire season begins. Look at that. This is just, April 21st? A wildfire burned south of Fort McMurray, Alberta, near Highway 63. They are battling, it says. It is incredibly dry. And the flames are covering 1,600 hectares, which is 4,000 acres. They're very indicative of the conditions we're seeing right now. And it's really scary because, again, I think we're going to have this wildfire smoke all over the United States. And authorities have warned residents to be prepared to evacuate the area if necessary. So here we go again. Record night temperatures for April in parts of West Africa and Chad even tied its hottest day in history with 48 C, which is 118 F. 6 countries in southeastern Asia recorded their hottest April night temperatures. Turkey felt its hottest day ever in April last week. 39.2 or 102.5. Drought in Mexico is causing conflict between subsistence farmers and the cartel-linked avocado plantations. So listen, do you eat avocados? A serious risk. These people have to take on the cartel-backed avocado farms. Do you know what you're eating? After enduring years of drought and invading fruit farmers in Mexico, these locals are taking matters into their own hands. Desperate Mexican villagers are taking direct action on commercial avocado farms that are drying up streams while a severe drought drags on. Rivers and even whole lakes, which I showed you Friday in last week in collapse, are disappearing in the once green and lush state of Michoacan in the mountains west of Mexico City. Drought has combined with a surge in the use of water for the country's lucrative export crops, led by avocados. Yep. So how are they doing it? Last week, dozens of residents, farm workers, and small-scale farmers, they hiked up the hills to tear out irrigation equipment using mountain springs to water avocado orchards carved out of pine-covered hills. So look forward to not having your avocados, guys. The week before, another group went up and they with picks and shovels and breached the walls of an illegal containment pond that sucked up water from a spring that had supplied local residents for hundreds of years. In the last 10 years, the streams, the springs, the rivers have been drying up and the water has been captured, mainly to be used for avocados and berries, said local activist Julio Santoyo, one of the organizers of the effort. There are hamlets in the lower part of the township that no longer have water. So this is an unlicensed irrigation pond. So pretty much, we're going to be seeing a lot more of this fighting as water and drought, water depletion and droughts continue. Sea surface temperatures remain at record highs for this year, as our friend Elliot has told us how many times. Look at 2024. Yep. A 14-page article in Science Advances claims that deep-sea troughs ferrying circumpolar deep water, often warmer and saltier, to the underside of ice shelves is causing concerning levels of melt, and we've talked about this on our channel before. Anchovies traditionally found in the Mediterranean have been detected off the Irish coast, about 750,000 of them, and scientists are baffled. They say that rising ocean temperatures are probably not enough to attribute this habitat change, since fewer than 150,000 anchovies were detected in those waters 4 years ago. South Africa and Namibia saw record autumn temperatures. Flooding in Mauritius forced the shutdown of many banks and offices, and flooding worsened in East Africa, where 90 plus have been killed by storms in the last fortnight. Tobacco plantations in Uganda killed off the usual food sources, forcing local species to eat virus-thick feces. Okay, this is really gross. And I'll show it to you really quick, but I'm not going to do this whole thing because it's so upsetting. Deforestation pushes animals in Uganda forests to eat virus-laden bat poo, and that is so clueless morons can smoke cigarettes, which shouldn't even be a thing anymore, but, freedom. It's really awful. Meanwhile, one of the largest mountains of trash in India has been on fire for a few days, spewing toxic fumes into the atmosphere, and it's growing by 2,000 tons of garbage a day. Imagine living near that in India. I can't imagine. Okay, so NASA released before and after images from Dubai's historic flooding. And that was April 3rd. And then April 19th. Lots of water. Lots and lots and lots of water in Dubai. Foreign disease and pests are damaging EU agriculture. Some 70 new threats each year. In Botswana, drought is evaporating muddy ponds, trapping hippos. Those which escape, desperately thirsty, become aggressive, and they invade nearby villages. Look at that. It's so sad. Conservation authorities on Friday, April 26, said that herds of endangered hippos trapped in the mud of dried up ponds are at risk of dying in drought hit Botswana. Over Antarctica, the ozone hole is stretching into December, the start of summer and breeding season. Scientists say that the exposure to extra radiation is affecting the eyesight of animals and may threaten their general health. They also blame Australian wildfires for their longer-lasting ozone hole. So it's even animals. It's not just, melting things. It's affecting seal pups and emperor penguin chicks. The radiation, the sea ice cover. It's just everything. Peak ozone depletion is in September to October, but it's still happening from November to December. Is it going to change? Are we going to be able to fix the ozone hole this time? Drinking water in Bangladesh is being poisoned by rising salinity in the drinking water. Women are especially affected, particularly pregnant women who suffer complications resulting from malnutrition, hypertension, menstrual interference, and more. So that's more females always being the people that suffer the worst. Children and women and children. Residents of an old neighborhood in Ethiopia were given 5 days notice before demolition, ostensibly to rebuild a modern city center, including a 10 billion palace complex. What the fuck is wrong with that picture? Standardized test scores in the UK are at appalling lows, a result blamed myopically, mostly on COVID school closures. A recent study from the UK claims that 28% of COVID survivors will develop some form of long-term COVID. 25% of those will experience brain fog, 75% some sort of depression and anxiety. Examinations into the variant of COVID, which has infected an old Dutch man and persisted in his body for 613 days, found that the COVID strain mutated into a new immunoevasive strain inside his body before killing him. Wow. Tell me that's not a point to think about, huh? Scientists claim bird flu was in cows last year. Probably. The U.S. FDA also announced that traces of bird flu were found in pasteurized milk, some 20% of samples, but the milk is still safe to drink. Nevertheless, the USDA is doing ongoing milk testing, albeit less than they first promised. The spread of Asian tiger mosquitoes farther northward in Europe portends the spread of malaria and dengue fever to areas where it has never before reached. Fun in the Anthropocene. Shadow banking relates to non-bank lenders, mostly private investors and unregulated institutions. Shadow banking is supposedly a $63 trillion problem worldwide. And the shadow real estate market in South Korea has central banks concerned. Delinquency rates are up, and shadow banking in real estate totals almost $7 trillion. Wonder if Donald Trump's involved in any of this. The Bank of England is warning about massive job losses if trends in shadow banking turn sour. Commodity prices worldwide are supposed to drop slightly, but inflation will continue. Let's go back to shadow banking a little bit.
What is a shadow bank? Well, what you and I would commonly call just a bank is actually more technically a commercial bank. And that means a bank that takes deposits from individuals and businesses, and it's insured by the government through the FDIC. Because of the government guarantee, depositors don't feel the need to run to the bank at the first sign of trouble and pull out their money. A shadow bank, on the other hand, does not take deposits and so does not fall under the FDIC. Shadow banks are generally any entities that perform bank-like activities but are not regulated like traditional banks. Examples include investment banks, along with other complex financial intermediaries such as hedge funds, issuers of asset-backed securities, money market funds, and even some parts of traditional commercial banks, which are not covered by the deposit insurance guarantee. Take investment banks, one type of shadow bank. Investment banks are a different kind of bank without a comparable governmental guarantee for deposits or liabilities. The money they use comes from investors, not from depositors. So the investors are always asking, if I lend my money to an investment bank, are my funds safe? Will I get my money back? And these investors are more watchful and sometimes even prone to panic if something seems to be wrong with the investment bank. And we saw a lot of this during the Great Recession.
In Scotland, rising numbers of youths are smoking marijuana. Across Great Britain, child alcohol abuse has become a serious problem. The UK has the highest rate worldwide, according to collected data. In France, youth curfews have been imposed to keep unaccompanied children under age 13 off the street, more for the safety of adults than kids. Well, what does that tell you? 2 Malaysian helicopters collided in midair, killing 10. The UK once again vowed to move forward with deporting migrants to Rwanda this summer. Protesters clashed with police in Venice over a modest, well, it's $5 and about 35-cent fee to enter the historic city on front lines of climate change. The pilot program means that day trippers going to Venice, one of Italy's most picturesque and historic cities, will need to pay $5.40. Municipal workers on Thursday were seen checking the tickets of day trippers outside the front of the Fragile Lagoon. My emphasis on fragile. And the mayor, via social media, said in the week that Venice would be the first major city to experiment with the payment program, although he says over-tourism is not a problem that only concerns this city. So it's all over. So we'll see what happens when people have to go and they have to pay. All right, now espionage against Germany by Russia and China is growing, or at least it's being identified. Haiti continues to get worse as famine continues eating away at the population. It is terrifying. 90% of Port-au-Prince lives under control of gangs, and the other 10% lives under the fear of gang expansion. Gangs forced the stop of the unloading of fuel at a port terminal on Monday so they could better wield their fuel as leverage. Haiti's new transitional council has been sworn in, but is impotent on its arrival. Rebel groups in Sudan, including but not limited to the RSF, attacked 11 settlements in Darfur following an old anti-black pattern practiced by the Janjaweed. In addition, potentially thousands of lives lost. The traumas of war threaten to perpetuate generational tensions from which new conflicts could sprout. A city that once held 500,000 people, many of whom themselves were displaced earlier, was razed and the people scattered or killed. And barely a peep of this is in the mainstream media.
This is believed to be Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces heading toward the city of El Fasher in North Darfur. It is the last part of the vast region not under RSF control. Global News cannot independently verify the video, but experts say it is likely from the past week, and they dread what it could mean.
The worst case is Hiroshima and Nagasaki level casualties.
Nathaniel Raymond says the RSF is now at the edges of El Fasher. The experienced human rights investigator has been monitoring alleged atrocities in Sudan's year-long war using high-definition satellite images.
Women were raped en masse in the cities that RSF have taken, and in some cases children were thrown into buildings on fire. We know what RSF will do. Anyone who says that RSF will not engage in mass atrocities here has not been paying attention.
The RSF denies allegations it has been involved in ethnic cleansing against non-Arabs in Darfur as it fights Sudan's armed forces. United Nations experts say 10 to 15,000 people were killed in the city of El Geneina when the RSF captured it last year.
The amount of people from groups that they have targeted for killing is 5 times larger than El Geneina here.
In 2020, international peacekeeping troops left the region after a 13-year mission established in Darfur following the killings and deaths of 200,000 people there 2 decades ago. The UN Security Council issued a statement of concern on Saturday about El Fasher.
It's so painful also to see the level of neglect by the international community towards Sudan question.
Sudanese activist Hala Al-Karib says hundreds of thousands of people have fled to El Fasher for safety during the conflict. And now, as the world is distracted by other wars, many of those people face the most horrific of fates. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
So it's in the Wall Street Journal. Experts following the Sudan war say surge in fighting around the city of El Fasher echoes violence that tore through Darfur in the early 2000s. Where is the outrage? Sudan's Parliamentary Rapid Support Forces and other allied militias in recent days have attacked and torched villages in war-torn Darfur, according to satellite images and interviews with survivors, stirring fears of more mass killings in the region. We've talked about this every week on this show. Civilians being killed. Listen to this one. Amani Jalia said she discovered the charred bodies of her elderly parents in their home in the village of Sarfaya, about 20 miles west of Al Fasher, following an attack by RSF fighters and Arab militia on March 29th. It's a travesty. It's humanity at its worst. They are setting fires on all the houses and firing in all directions. They were shouting and calling us slaves. If this isn't human rights watch territory, I don't know what is. Look at these people. It's just tragic. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in December said that both the RSF and the Sudanese military had committed war crimes and that the RSF was responsible for crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing. I'm waiting to hear him say something else. In Balochistan, a large region of Pakistan, an insurgency is growing, targeting Pakistani security forces and Chinese workers. Killings and IED detonations are said to be reported almost every day. Recruitment into the terror group, several thousand members, has been increased in response to the government's militarized approach to the counterinsurgency.
Myanmar is at risk of collapse. The long civil war has taken a major turn, and Thailand is in the firing line. Just days ago, officers dodged bullets here at the border, fired from across the river. a newly empowered resistance clashing with a military on the brink. It's created an exodus Thailand must now manage, trying to be both protector and enforcer.
We're on patrol with the Thai police along the border with Myanmar. They have stepped up their operations here in recent months along with the Thai military because the civil war in Myanmar has spilled over into Thailand. This area has heard and seen intense fighting.
The police told us they're arresting around 30 people a day crossing illegally, many young men trying to run away from conscription. Up here, you can see the new battle lines. Just a couple of weeks ago, a town controlled by the military for decades that few ever thought would fall suddenly did.
Just over there is the town of Myawaddy. It is strategically important, known as the gateway to Thailand. The fact the rebels have just taken control of it is a humiliating and symbolic defeat for the Myanmar military regime. It is a sign it is struggling to keep control.
The army reportedly launched an operation to retake it. But watch as their convoy is attacked, rebels taking over their vehicles. Some Thai soldiers say they saw it coming.
I felt the resistance groups were well prepared. There were signs before they attacked. My unit could see their manpower and their weapons, and there were civilians waiting along the river, getting ready to cross over.
But it's now in flux and could change hands yet again. This video shows junta soldiers yesterday raising a flag there. Nini is among those who've secretly escaped the trouble in Myanmar.
He claims the authorities are torturing activists, an allegation we put to the military government, who have not responded.
They starve people, put them in stress positions and beat them until they bleed from their ears. When we were fleeing, most of my friends got arrested by the military. They were interrogated and tortured. They trained them for just 3 weeks and then sent them to the front line.
At the Mae Tao clinic, you can see the brutality of the conflict in those who managed to flee. Myanmar says he was hit by a military airstrike that killed his 2 daughters.
They were hiding in a school. I thought it would be safe. After the bomb, I saw the body of one of my daughters ripped apart.
Dr. Cynthia Mang is caring for 500 new patients every day.
Does this feel as bad as it's ever been since the coup?
Yeah, this is one of the worst. This, in my time, in 35 years here, this was the worst situation, one of the worst situations on the border here.
These are the faces of a deepening humanitarian crisis, caught in the crosshairs of a relentless insurgency and embattled regime. Now, so too are Myanmar's neighbours. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Mae Sot, Thailand.
Thailand used to be a big playground for Westerners, is probably not going to be so much anymore. And I also realized I've been saying junta instead of junta. So I should have put it in Google search to pronounce. I didn't. All right. Donald Trump is building a team of China hawks for his potential cabinet and allegedly planning a more aggressive stance towards China should he return to power. Reports emerged that on the day Iran launched 300 plus drones against Israel, a simultaneous crackdown began in Iran against women flouting the country's strict hijab laws. Wow. Now, okay, so they're cracking down on females wearing them. They don't like it there. They want to control all the females, just like most patriarchal Orthodox religions. They're embarking on a less noticed confrontation at home, ordering police in several cities to take to the streets to arrest women of flouting its strict Islamic dress code. Iranian authorities insist that their so-called noir light campaign targets businesses and individuals who defy the hijab law, aiming to respond to demands from devout citizens who are angry about the growing number of unveiled women in public. It's amazing that that is what is so important to them. It just astounds me. Boy. More details are emerging about a massacre in Burkina Faso from February. They separated men and women in groups. As we started moving forward, they opened fire on us indiscriminately, said one sole survivor. You know, for a collapse show, this is certainly becoming a war show. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights announced the discovery of mass graves at 2 hospitals in Gaza, buried deep in the ground and covered with waste. An official from the United Nations announced that clearing all the rubble and unexploded bombs from Gaza could take 14 years. And the war isn't over yet. A growing number of analysts say war against Hezbollah is inevitable as both sides have recently escalated strikes over their 130 kilometers or 81-mile border barrier, the so-called Blue Line. Hundreds of student protesters were arrested across a number of universities, demanding the institutions divest from Israeli corporations and generally opposing Israel's actions in Gaza. Hundreds of thousands of students in Argentina protested against cuts to universities. Ukraine suspended consular services for men 18 to 60 living outside Ukraine as part of a pressure campaign to get them back to Ukraine, where they could be conscripted. Russia warned that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, threatening an unspecified retaliation if Ukraine's allies seize the roughly $300 billion frozen assets formerly under Russia's control. On the battlefield, momentum is moving against Ukraine, although small victories remain. Ukraine is pulling back its Abrams tanks because Russian drones are too easily taking out the tanks. 5 of the 31 $10 million apiece tanks provided in September have been destroyed so far. All for those American jobs in the military-industrial complex. Reports emerged that the U.S. sent long-range ATA-CMSs, We secretly sent them. This is what they look like. Live fire testing of them. So this is a missile. And let's see what it does. It can hit targets as far as 186 miles. Isn't this fun? Yep. We just love all of this war. Yeah, it's just what we want. Not, obviously. It's just when you look at all of it in one place, all of the conflicts around the world, it is overwhelming. We have a climate war and a war, religious wars, property wars, water wars. Wow. Ammunition for Patriot systems is now being rushed to Ukraine. Russia vetoed a resolution to ban the use of nuclear weapons in space. Worldwide defense spending hit all-time highs in 2023, about $2.44 trillion in U.S., and U.S. accounts for $850 billion of that total. Holy crap. Now, I wanted to look at this really quick because just think about this. Russia vetoes U.S.-backed UN resolution to ban nuclear weapons in space. Is there nowhere where we won't go with this? They vetoed it that proposed a ban on the use of nuclear weapons in outer space amid U.S. intelligence-backed concerns that Moscow's trying to develop a nuclear device capable of destroying satellites. So just think, you are in your yard having that barbecue with your family, and so just imagine, nuclear weapons up there blowing them up. What is going to come down in your yard? Oh my God. So, yeah, it's just kind of crazy, but they're all paranoid and we're all paranoid. The Russians describe the UN draft as a dirty spectacle and a cynical ploy prepared by the backers, US and Japan. Well, anti-satellite capability. Experts of this say this kind of weapon could have the potential to wipe out mega constellation of small satellites like SpaceX Starlink, which has been successfully used by Ukraine to counter Russian troops. Putin said in March Moscow's ready to use nuclear weapons if there is a threat to the existence of Russian state, but there has never been such a need. So yes, we are living in the Anthropocene, but I would wonder, the insanity Pocene, the psychopathic Pocene. There's, how many can you pick from? All right, now, Amnesty International, they released its enormous 418-page State of the World's Human Rights Report for 2023 with 155 country-specific rundowns of selected human rights violations. Yeah, that report probably could be a whole show. The general worldwide picture is one of regression to old norms and the breakdown of international law. And here it is. Amnesty International, download it. It's long. There is it's a PDF, and I'm sure it's probably actually pretty good read. Upsetting read. I haven't read it. The general worldwide picture, of regression to old norms, the breakdown of international law. So this is the world seeing near breakdown of international laws amid wars in Gaza and Ukraine, Amnesty International says.
The only thing standing between the people of Gaza and a ceasefire is Hamas. They have to decide, and they have to decide quickly. We are determined to do everything we can to bring an end to the terrible human suffering that we're seeing every single day in Gaza.
Now, I will leave that up to you guys to decide if you thought that was a bunch of propaganda. Authoritarian policies ate away at freedoms of expression and association, hit out at gender equality, and eroded sexual and reproductive rights. The underlying public narratives based in hatred and rooted in fear encroached on civic space and demonized marginalized individuals. Climate activists were branded terrorists for denouncing governments expanding fossil fuel production and investment. States turned increasingly to facial recognition technologies to aid in policing of public protests. In Afghanistan, being a woman or a girl has been de facto criminalized. To be a Palestinian in Gaza today is to be plunged to a far more violent, destructive version of the 1948 Nakba. Russia's aggression has continued to manifest itself in deliberate attacks against civilians, killing thousands, and widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure. So there you have it. Right around the world. Last week in collapse. World events in the Anthropocene, as narrated by Sandy Shells, who unfortunately, I recorded this today for tonight because I'll never be able to sit through it tonight. I have to nurse my back. I have a trip coming up. My mother's 90th birthday. I have taken away the purple hair a little bit to try to be a little conservative and make her happy. Why not? She's lived through a lot. Every time I've seen her, I've been interviewing her about her life. Very interesting. 90 years old. You know, people can say, well, it's her fault, she's in that, whatever. She lived through the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 10s, and 20s. What a story she has to tell. So we'll see you next Tuesday night. And in the meantime, pray for peace in your own way, however you pray. Good.